to the Tom Baker Show. It is great to be back on PowerTube TV once again. And this show, of course, being brought to you by TrackTude. You're going to hear more from them over the course of this next hour or so. And also want to let you know that this show brought to you as well by Ultimate QM. If you're looking to get your son or daughter into racing for the first time, quarter midget racing is a great option, and Ultimate QM is, well, the ultimate quarter midget manufacturer. UltimateQM.com. Our special guest on this show is a young man who is trying to make his way up the formula racing ladder, and he is in France right now. His name is Hugh Barter, and it is exciting for us, Hugh, to have you on the show. You are one of the top prospects, and happy to be able to kind of shine the spotlight on you and your budding career here, and want to talk about as well how difficult it really is from the inside to make it through the formula ladder all the way to F1. So we'll dive into all of that as we go through the show. Hugh, why don't you start by telling us how old you are and where you're from? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me on the show. Much appreciated. So yeah, I'm 18 years old. I was born in Japan, Nagoya, before moving to Australia when I was 2, where I lived most of my life racing go-karts, and before moving to Europe in 2021 to pursue my dream of becoming a Formula One driver. And since then, I've achieved some pretty good results, finishing vice champion in French F4 in 2021 with a scholarship. I did win a scholarship in 2020 actually. That's how I got to Europe in the first place. And then in 2022, competing in a dual campaign in French F4 and Spanish F4, finishing vice champion in both championships with, I think it was like 18 wins. So very successful season. And then racing FIA Formula 3 in 2023 before having to pull out before the end of the season due to the lack of funding.
Okay, so that's a good synopsis. Now let's take a little bit of a deeper dive. And I want to start with, because I always wonder about this, everyone has their own story with this. What got you interested in motorsports in the first place? How did you get interested in racing, and how old were you when that happened?
I guess you could say that the age of even 2 years old, I had a somewhat interest in cars and stuff. You know, as a baby, I was basically playing around with, like, you know, Hot Wheels and scooters and, you know, basically anything that was automotive. And then when I came to Australia for the first time, my dad took me to the Formula One, and basically from his words, not mine, because obviously I don't really remember that. My eyes lit up, and basically, you know, he took me to the V8 supercars in Australia, and I remember that very clearly. The first experience, you know, hearing those V8s just roar past you, and then.
Yeah.
And then there was a simulator that we were walking past as we were leaving the track, and I basically had to beg my dad to get on that thing. You know, I was being 5 years old. No, this would have been 3 or 4 years old at the time. You know, I was,
Wow.
you know, less than a foot tall almost. No, it's exaggeration, but, you know, I was very small. And basically he kept telling me, no, you can't get on. You're not tall enough. And then basically, you know, I basically nagged him enough till he finally caved and asked the guy that was owning the sim place, can I do the pedals while my son does the steering? And unbeknownst to both my dad and I, there was a crowd forming behind us while I was driving. And by the time we got off, or both dad and I had finished, people were clapping, and, you know, being a,
Oh, wow.
3-year-old, 4-year-old, I had no idea why they were there, why they were clapping. You know, I was just me doing my thing, you know, trying to keep it on the black stuff. And then my dad thought, you know, there was something here, called mum up, and on my 5th birthday, I woke up with a go-kart in the living room and a trailer out the front yard. And I guess at the time I had no expectation of like where this would lead, but as soon as I got into it, it was like I wanted to become a Formula One driver, and that's been the dream since.
Wow, that's crazy. So you actually had other fans or other people clapping for the combined performance that you and your dad had on the simulator.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I want to talk about the supercars for reference for a second. I'm a huge supercars fan. I love supercars racing. Have you been to a lot of supercars events? Do you watch them a lot? What is, I know Formula One's your dream, but where does supercars rank in the lexicon of classes that you enjoy watching?
I mean, I really enjoy supercars. I enjoy any form of motor racing, honestly. I watch IndyCar, for example. I watch ELMS, WEC, I watch any form, but supercars is a whole lot of fun, and it's very like in Australia, it's a very almost like cultural thing, Yeah, Bathurst 1000, all the
Yeah.
family sort of gather up and then just watch the Bathurst 1000 for the whole day, and it's there's the barbecues out, the sausages. It's a very like vibrant environment.
Okay. Well, that doesn't surprise me because that's one of those races, right? There's a number of races across the world. Obviously, the Indy 500 for us with NASCAR, it's Daytona. Le Mans. I mean, you've got so many staple races, and the Bathurst 1000 is certainly
For sure.
one of those big events. Yeah. So that's awesome. I just had to ask you more about that. So you're 5 years old. You get a go kart now. Is this a two-cycle cart? I would imagine because that's what's big over there, right?
Yeah. So it's
So talk a little bit about what the class was, how fast did it go, and kind of where did you race it? Just give us a look back at your first race in your first year. What do you remember?
so long ago. The cart was basically I think it was like 900 mil chassis, so from the front to the back,
Okay.
and even that was too big for me. I couldn't reach the pedals. I had pedal extensions in there. I had a pedal extension on a pedal extension, um, and
That would have been me at 5.
yeah, and I was so small that I was having to look through like the gaps in the steering wheel because I couldn't see over the steering wheel. But yeah, I think it was a 60 cc motor. You might know it's a Coma engine. It's like a
Okay.
lawnmower engine.
Yeah. Okay.
It was
Comer. Yep.
like a ripcord that you had to pull to start it.
Okay.
Um, Super loud, considering the horsepower that it made. But yeah, it was nothing crazy. Top speed of what, like 90 kilometers, maybe 80. Uh,
Okay.
but yeah, it was back then it was a lot of fun because the tire compound that we're running on was like basically no grip, so you could slide it a lot and it would still pull off the corner.
Okay. so so you ran a couple of years just at kind of outlaw events, so to speak, kind of local events. How did you do? Did you win? Did you take to it naturally, or was there a big learning curve for you at that age?
Yeah, well, the first 2 years were like all unsanctioned races. So I was racing with people, like there was like small classes that no one were really in, and then they would put them in a group. So it was like a multi-class racing. It was like IMSA. So I was basically in my own class for a long time before I sort of more people came along, and then I had my first like trophy. I think it was a win. So long ago. I have there's photos of it. And I wouldn't say I won much then, but then once I started getting into the sanction stuff, and then I started getting results.
Okay, so we get to age what, 7, and you start running. What you got your license? Is that like an FIA license? How does that work over there? And it says on my notes you started driving at official race events
Correct.
as opposed to unofficial, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, what? Tell us about your first foray into sort of the national level.
So the national level wasn't until probably 2015, but
Oh,
I got my license in 2013. Back then it was a bit more complicated because of the way that the rules were. It was basically national events were like one-off rounds, and it wasn't till 2015 I think they brought out the nationals and basically made the national events a round series. It was a series, became a championship rather than a one-off
okay.
event. Um, and Yeah, so basically in 2013, when I got my license, you have to go through basically like a number of races, finish in a certain position, do a number of laps, and then you get your license. But you have to prove yourself basically that you're competent
Sure.
to race, because when you're on your Ps, you always have to start at the back of the grid. But when you get off your P plates and get your official license, you can start wherever you want.
Okay.
And back then there was no qualifying; it was luck of the draw. You pick your name out of the hat,
Oh,
and
wow.
that was where you start. So yeah, it was wild. That was your just like local club meetings, but then when you went to the state titles, that's when you got a bit more serious, and there was more like more on the lines. There was quality, obviously. But yeah, I'd say my first like proper national state level event was in 2014, and I think I finished. I know I finished inside the top 10, and honestly I think I was pretty happy with that for a first. People like the
That's
name of
incredible.
Oscar Piastri were there, Jack Doohan was there,
Oh, wow.
some very big names. Yeah.
Yeah. Oscar's in Formula One. Obviously, Jack is well on his way. I think Jack's an incredible talent. And we'll get to some names. I want to throw out some names later and talk about some of the drivers that I follow from the U.S. and get your thoughts. But you were still very young. I mean, only what, 8 or 9 in 14, and you had a huge year that year and really kind of started to build your brand and your name, so to speak, back in 2014, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the results helped, but honestly, being so young at that stage, my dad was really helping me out with you know building my brand, because he knew that my dream was Formula One at that stage, and he knew that we needed to build myself up in social media at a really young age, because you can't wait till you're 15 or 16 to then start. It's by then
Yeah.
it's a bit too late. So we've been building connections since then, and we've also been reaching out to companies since then. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, I mean, there's the on track and off track part of this, and I know that as the next few years unfolded for you, you started winning state championships and started winning some national races as well.
Yeah, correct. It was after 2014, we had a little bit of 15 was a bit of a rough year. We switched kart manufacturers and we struggled, but then after that, it really took off. The hard work that we did in 2015 really paid off. 16, 17, 18, 19, coming away with multiple national round wins, multiple state championships, going to world titles in 2016, being the fastest in a lot of the practice sessions. I had a little bit of I choked in quali, let's say, but I was still fast. I was super young at that stage, and I was I'd say a bit inexperienced, but I was still super happy with the pace. And then in 2019, went back and qualified third for the world titles.
Wow.
So it was a really good end or way to sort of wrap up my last years in karting before getting into cars, because they were super successful.
Well, we're going to talk about that transition over to cars and the fact that you signed with someone who is a famous name in F1. We're going to talk about that after we come back. We'll be back with more of the Tom Baker Show right after this.
Attention track and series owners, elevate your fan experience with the TrackTune app. TrackTune works with your PA system. Fans and teams at the track can hear the announcers through their phones, ensuring everyone hears race calls, sponsor plugs, and more during race nights. It's simple to set up, affordable, and free for fans to download and enjoy. Visit tracktune.live for all the details and join tracks nationwide on the app today.
Welcome back, and this segment being brought to you by UltimateQM.com. If you are looking forward to getting your son or daughter into motorsports, quarter midget racing is a very safe and very economical way to do it. You get to run any number of races from local to national, and even run on NASCAR weekends at different NASCAR tracks. Ultimate QM is a manufacturer that is family owned, and they have built winning quarter midgets for a number of drivers. You need to check them out if you're looking to get into quarter midget racing. UltimateQM.com is the place to go. We are talking tonight with a young man from France who is making his way through the Formula ranks. And Hugh Barter has told us that he's gone through his kind of karting phase from about 7 years old until, about 14, 15, I guess, 13 actually, I would say. And then now we bring this to 2020, and 2020 was obviously a very hard year worldwide with the pandemic setting in, but you did have a huge accomplishment that year in signing with Daniel Ricciardo's go-kart factory team. Now, I want to know how that started, and then take us through that year and into 21.
Yeah, that started all in 2019, actually. In 2019, a lot of teams wanted to sign me, but we wanted to stay with the company that the karting company that we had been with in previous years, and we wanted to be loyal to them. And we did that through 2019, had a really good season. And then a lot of the teams then approached me again for the end of the 2019 season for the 2020. And there were just some really good deals. And obviously 2020 was going to be my last season in karting. And Daniel Ricciardo's factory team basically gave me the opportunity by saying, if you do a well enough year with us, we will give you basically a ticket to go to a shootout where you can basically win a scholarship to race the French F4 in 2021.
Oh, wow.
And so that was a big carrot for us, because this would be perfect for our transition from karting to cars. And so
that's incredible.
Yeah, we couldn't really say no to that. We we took the opportunity with both hands, and signed for Daniel Ricciardo's team. And then obviously the COVID hit in 2020, just after the first round of the national championship, which I won. Honestly, without that, I don't know if I would have got the ticket, because it was a bit of a, if I didn't do that race, then, how would they know if I had deserved the ticket or not? And yeah, so then went over to Europe in October, basically peak COVID at the time. And that was a struggle. Finding sponsorship for that, everything was extremely expensive, and a lot of companies weren't in the position to say put their hand up. But luckily enough, some of my sponsors came through and were super supportive of me. And then I won. I won the scholarship.
Incredible.
They tested your physical attributes, how you are mentally, how you present yourself in the press, PR wise, and as well as your driving. Would you believe that?
Yes, I would absolutely believe that.
So they take all of these.
The part that's throwing me is they tested you mentally and you still won it. Must not have been a thorough mental test.
I fooled them. Make it till you make it.
That's right.
So they really liked me, and they gave me the scholarship. And then in 2021, my whole family moved over, besides my sister.
Nice.
She's 10 years older than me, so she's self-sustained by that point. And so since then we've been living all around Europe, moving around, and winning as much as we get.
That's amazing. Yeah, and we're going to get to that. I want to ask you two things. First of all, what's Danny Ricciardo like? What was it like to race for him? How involved was he? How much did you talk to him? Do you still talk to him? Tell us about that relationship a little bit.
We don't, let's say we, when I say we as a team, don't get much contact with Daniel, as I think what most people think, but he is definitely involved within the team, the team that I race for. And basically I got a surprise call one night, and I pick up the phone, and he goes, "How are you, mate?" I'm like, who's this? And then I had to look, because I was staying with my team owner at the time, and I look over my shoulder. It's my team owner, and he's like, "It's Daniel Ricciardo." I was like, "No." I was like, Like, hello, and then I was like so stunned. I was like starstruck, and I had a good chat. He's a super nice guy, super like he's not different, let's say, away from what he is on the camera.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, just a super genuine, just like any other Australian guy, honestly.
Okay. So then my next question is, you went and won that big event. Like, how many people were you competing against at that, and what were the circumstances around you actually winning? Because that's a pretty big stage for someone who's as young as you still were, about what, 13 years old or so.
Yeah. So basically, how it works is that the manufacturer, Ricardo Car, has also other sister companies, which
Okay.
are produced by the same warehouse, basically, and
Yep.
and each country, not every country, but about 20, I think, choose their driver, a driver from their team to then go represent their country for the shootout. And so I was one of the 20. Obviously, being in Australia, it's very isolated. So I knew no one when I came to the shootout. Well, almost everyone there, because it's a European-based event, knew each other. So I had no reference who these people were, and I didn't find out until after the event that one of the people who were there were then just became, well, who polled, actually no, they polled the world championships in karting like the week after,
Okay.
and I had no idea that he was like that good, you know. So
Wow.
it was a, I think it was probably, I think it came to actually my benefit. They didn't know who they were, you know. It was like it was a blank canvas. There was no, wasn't intimidated at all, you know. It was just do my best. That's all I can do.
That's it was enough to win. That was the main thing. And so
Exactly.
we start in 2021. You're running French F4, and you end up winning two races your first year and finishing second in the championship. Now I got to ask, what was the transition like? Because I know that I've watched some drivers over here in the U.S. transition up to like F4 out of say karting. But over there, I know it's so much more competitive and so much deeper of a field, and just the level of competition's amazing. What was that transition like for you?
The transition was quite hard actually. I I think I was a bit naive, not gonna lie, that year. I came into the first round with 7 test days only ever in this car.
Wow.
And there were people there that had done over, you know, 15 days, 20 days. Some even had done, that was their second year. So it was hard to come in with very little experience and sort of know my way around certain situations. You know,
Yep.
there's also that fear when you don't have the budget that, you know, if you do crash the car, well, what's going to happen? So you
Yeah.
have to juggle that mentally. And I think it was also a bit of a, like a bit of a deer in headlight situation where no one knows who you are. You come over to Europe and then you win in the first round of the championship, and then people look at you like, "Who are you?" Um, which is a good
And where did
feeling.
you come from?
Yeah, it's a good feeling, but it's also sort of
Yeah.
like it's a bit of, it can like cause a bit of like expectations on you for the
Right.
running
Yeah.
rounds to like also
Yep.
perform. Um, and I did have some good rounds after the first round, but then I kind of fell into a plateau. And then I came back at the end of the season because I just like I just focused on doing my own thing, and yeah, I finished the season strong with another win. So
And second in the championship. That's
correct,
fantastic.
yeah.
I mean, that had to exceed your own expectations for that first year, right?
Yes and no. Um, as a driver, you always want to win. You always come into the season sort of having expectations to do somewhat well. You don't come into a season, okay, let's hope for a top 10. You
Yeah.
come into the season like let's finish on the podium. Let's finish on at least the on the steps. Um, and that's what I did. I got my name out there. I definitely, there was a lot more people who knew who I was by the end of the season. That's for sure. Um, and that got me the opportunity for the running year.
Well, and going into your second season in 2022, you didn't just run French F4, you added Spanish F4. So you're running like 42 races that year, and you end up with 18 wins, second in both championships. And you did have an issue with some points being taken away during regulations for doing 2 championships at once, but that's an incredible. Talk about the 2022 season a little bit.
Yeah, it was it was a really good season actually, and I actually really enjoyed it. Even with how busy I was, like going between the 2 championships, it was a whole lot of fun. And in car racing, you don't really get much seat time because, well, it's so expensive. You know, it's not like karting. You can just take your go-kart down to your local track and just hop in. No, you have to rent out the track. You have to rent out the car, and by the end, you've spent 20 grand just to do a couple of test days. And so being able to do 2 championships really allowed me to get as much seat time as possible, not just testing, but racing. It was a big difficulty to actually switch between the 2 championships at the start of the season because the cars drove completely differently, and I had to adjust my driving a lot. And then when I did figure it out, the wind started pouring in at least the Spanish F4. The French F4 I understood because I did one season already, but the Spanish F4 I had to really adjust my driving. And I think at the start of the season, I was really banking off my experience from the previous year, honestly. And that's why I did well at the start. And then I sort of plateaued in the second round. And then I understood what I was lacking, came back third round and had a pole and unfortunately stalled. But that's part of racing. And then came to the fourth round and, finishing within first, second all the time. Then fifth round, 2 wins, sixth round, 3 wins, and then so on and so forth. So it was a learning curve as well. Just learning how to manage a championship. Obviously in the French F4 I was leading for majority of the season, and I had to manage my situation because it's yes, I had 100 and something points taken away, but I still had to manage that gap and make sure that I was finishing constantly. So it was
well, you were doing all of that too, really without the same size budget as a lot of your competition, right? I mean, that you've had to develop yourself as a real thinking man's racer because you can't just go out and break cars. You have to, you were on a budget and you had to be able to finish races. So that I think that probably helped you a little bit in your development to this point, right?
Yeah, correct. And I still have clips from that season that I tend to just watch, go back on and go, yeah, that's a good move.
Yeah, I imagine. That's incredible. And we're going to talk more about that and talk about this past year and also just talk about the kind of the process of trying to climb that ladder, a process that you're still kind of right in the middle of. We're going to do that when we come back. More of the Tom Baker Show right after this.
Attention track and series owners, elevate your fan experience with the TrackTune app. TrackTune works with your PA system. Fans and teams at the track can hear the announcers through their phones, ensuring everyone hears race calls, sponsor plugs, and more during race nights. It's simple to set up, affordable, and free for fans to download and enjoy. Visit tracktune.live for all the details and join tracks nationwide on the app today.
Welcome back to the show, and Hugh Barter is our guest tonight. We've had some interesting conversation with Hugh about his career to date. Young man, 18 years old, and currently is kind of sitting in FIA F3, and he's looking for an opportunity to get back behind the wheel and continue his climb up the Formula ladder. We talked last segment, Hugh, about 2022 when 42 races between the French and Spanish F4 series, 18 wins, second in both titles, and you're doing this as basically a budget racer as much as possible. Can you talk about, first of all, what it was like to be, I mean, French and Spanish, are they the same rules? What are the differences between the two? Just sort of paint us the picture of what you were dealing with that year, going from one to the other and trying to do it without nearly the budget that a lot of your competitors had.
Yeah, so between the two championships is quite a big difference. The French is an organization, so the entire grid is run under one tent,
Okay.
and everybody shares the data, everybody shares everything, and basically it's a very more fixed series. You can only change certain things on the
Ah,
car. You can
okay.
only change anti-roll bars and your wings,
Okay.
and the it's really more of a drivers' championship where you have to look after yourself. There's no really personal engineers. There's no personal like mechanics or like team manager to then go up and discuss this to the stewards or something. You really have to push everything yourself. So it
Interesting.
makes the
Okay.
driver, I'd say, resilient. But on the other hand, it doesn't teach you what the Spanish does, the environment of working in a team, getting the people to like you. Because at the end of the day, if the team likes you, they're gonna benefit you. I mean, it's just you can't shy away from that. You know, I think the if the team sees that you're putting the hard work in, you're putting the extra effort in, there's going to be a bit of bias to helping you out, or maybe they're a bit more detailed on your car, so there's less mechanical failures. It's these sort of small nitty gritty things that you're not going to find in something like the French F4. Um, and then the actual cars were different. So the cars
Oh,
were two different manufacturers. The engines were different. The tires were different.
oh,
So
wow.
I had to basically every time I was coming into a race weekend, switching between championships, I had to like really like think in my head, I need to drive like this, or I need to drive like that.
Yeah.
Because if I drove like the French F4 car in Spanish F4, it was a waste of time. I might as well just not turn up to the event, honestly.
Okay.
um,
How is it different? Explain what the driving was in French versus Spanish.
yeah, so the French F4 had a tire compound that was very soft on the sidewalls, so
Okay.
you naturally could trail brake a lot into the corner. So when you brake and you start turning, you could hold the brake for a really long time. And so that was promoting a lot of rotation through the brake in the middle. Well, in the Spanish F4, it was a really stiff sidewall. So basically, what was happening was most of the rotation was happening by like almost like drifting through the corner, and you had to like table the braking. You brake, you peak very soft, and then you hold, and then you slowly start to bleed off. But
Okay.
it's more aggressive than what the French F4 was. The French F4 was a very slow, digressive stage, and
Gotcha.
switching between these two driving styles was something I didn't get to midway through the season. And then once I understood that, like I said, the results started coming in, and not just that, the way you start the cars off the line was completely different. The buy point was night and day. One was super aggressive, the other one was super easy to stall. So yeah, it was a big learning curve that I had to adjust to.
So that's a huge sort of mental adjustment between the two, which obviously that tells me that you're able to adapt very quickly and be able to go back and forth in a versatile kind of way and still be successful. Okay, now at that point in 2022, were you sponsored yet at that point? And talk a little bit about how that all went with the funding and then into 23 as well.
Yeah, just to go back, I guess a little bit. I've been sponsored in my career since I was 10 years old, I think, fully
Oh,
funded.
wow. Okay.
So I've been sponsored for a long time. I think, like I said earlier, my dad brought my profile up really early on in my career because he knew that as a family we didn't have the funding to just go to Formula One.
Yep.
We need some sponsors, that's for sure. Even in karting, because it can get expensive in karting.
Yeah.
And basically, we made connections, and yeah. To go back to what your question is, we had sponsors in 2022.
Okay.
A big one that basically funded everything, I would say, a mass portion of it. And he put his hand up, thankfully, for the 2023 season. And unfortunately, towards the end of the season, I had to pull out due to some cash flow issues within his company. No hard feelings against him. Without him, I wouldn't have done a 2022 season, wouldn't had a
Sure.
2023 season. Business is business. Yeah, I think it was slightly on us, like my team, my management. We didn't have a backup, and
Okay.
so we are currently in negotiations with some companies for this current season and trying to build connections again. We had to start the wheel up.
Yeah. Get the machine in motion again.
Yeah,
and
because
kind
it's
of back to ground zero, right?
yeah, exactly. Like I think people are a bit naive thinking that sponsorship is just a overnight thing. It's a really
Yeah.
you need to build the relationship with the person. You can't just go, especially when you're asking for such mass amounts of money. You can't just walk up to the person and go, "Can I have 200 grand?" No. You need
Yeah.
you need to really think about like how is it going to benefit their company? And a lot of the time, honestly, the person that you're approaching, you're trying to approach, they have a passion in motorsport and they can relate to it. Because if you go to someone that doesn't, then they don't understand the sport that well, or they
Yeah.
don't really see the let's say the dream behind it.
Yeah.
The person who sponsored me last year and the year before, Alexander, is a huge motorsports fan. He drove himself, and I think was enjoying coming to the tracks and just being there. And yeah, so it's
And that's so much of it, isn't it? Is explaining how the sport does work and how the ladder works and the business to business connections and all of that. I feel like, and over there, I know, at least, from what I see from the US, it appears as though there are so many really, really top funded drivers there that, there's so much competition for so few opportunities. Is that fair?
I think that is very true. I mean, you got to think about it as a way that it's a very steep funnel. You go from karting where there's, I think my dad did the numbers the other day. There's like a million karters, or something like this,
Yeah.
just in Europe, and then you have to think like that gets funneled down into what, let's say six F4 series, 7, 8 maybe, and then in each series there's 20 drivers. So if you do the
Okay.
maths there, it's 160
160?
160 drivers. Then that gets funneled down into, let's say, F3, like the regional F3s, which is then another 30 cars per grid, and there's 3 championships that do F3 in Europe. So that's 90. Then that gets funneled down into 30 for FI3. Then that gets funneled down into 22 for F2, and then it gets funneled down to 20 in F1. So it's really steep, and to stand out in the crowd is super important, because what sets you apart from everybody else. What can you bring to the table is the question that everybody's asking, especially if you're sponsoring someone.
Oh, I was going to say, and it seems like that as those numbers are so stark, by the way. I mean, you look at, going down to less than 100 and then less than that and then less than that. There are so many folks who have so much money, right? And so then it becomes the differences,
Yeah.
I would think, between, the accomplishments, the talent, all of that. And so you're kind of at the point now where you've proven yourself amazingly well at the F4 level, and you were starting to blossom in FIA F3 when your sponsor had to pull out. I'm assuming at this point that's where you would pick up is FIA F3 if you could get a sponsor back behind you, right? I mean, talk some numbers with us. What's it really like, and what do the sponsor get? What can you offer the sponsor for the money that you need?
Yeah, so there's multiple things. For one, there's B2B connections. So I have a lot of connections globally to to any companies. Actually, the company that sponsored me last year, we've made multiple connections for them, for their business, and
Nice.
hopefully they can make a profit out of that. It's just time and stuff is just didn't line up
Sure.
with my season, which is fine. And they plan to come back on board. But it's stuff like that that helps out, as well as hospitality events at the actual F3. We plan to have that in next year. So basically, people come to the event, they socialize, and then they meet the other people from other companies. And it's, again, B2B connections, but a bit more personalized. And as well, you get the experience of being there in a Formula One weekend. So you have a bit of fun.
So you're there with the F1 series, which is that's a huge deal that you get to be a part of all that. Now, you also, I would imagine, because of that fact, you basically are able to race in front of the F1 crowd too, right?
Correct.
I mean, they feature the F3 and F2 series pretty big.
Exactly, and it's actually quite impressive. The turnout for F3 and F2 is quite big, considering it's so early in the morning. There is a massive crowd there. And you have to think
awesome.
that the people that are coming to that early in the morning are coming just to watch you. It's not just like it's like they're there because they want to watch you, and it's quite impressive. I was really impressed last year to see. I rock up to the track Actually, I was rocking up to the track 6 o'clock because sometimes I race at like 8:30 in the morning.
Wow!
And there were people already lined up. It's wild. So there's obviously that side of thing, because it's big exposure, and especially seeing it in the same broadcast as the F1.
Sure.
And then there's the side of I have a potential documentary, let's say, that might come up soon. Basically having what they want to do is show the ins and outs of being a race car driver, how difficult it is, and what it takes to become one.
Wow.
And being featured in that will be big. Getting broadcasted, I think they plan to be broadcasted in America, Australia, Europe, in Asia as well. So that's a big opportunity for some companies that we want to approach with also.
Don't forget us little people when you become a movie star. Okay? Talk a little bit about that, though, because that, again, for someone who would come on board as a sponsor for you, that's amazing. That's something that's evergreen and is a whole other sort of bunch of exposure that doesn't have anything directly to do with the race weekends.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if I'm using their product or whatever their company is in the actual documentary, then
yes,
it's a bit more personal with the product, or whatever it may be. And I think it creates a good image, and people are more inclined to go check them out and bring in revenue that way. I think it's a really good opportunity for myself.
Oh, it's an awesome opportunity, it sounds like, and can't wait to see how that develops for you. We're going to step aside. When we come back, we got one more segment with Hugh Barter, and we'll get to it right after this.
Attention track and series owners, elevate your fan experience with the TrackTune app. TrackTune works with your PA system. Fans and teams at the track can hear the announcers through their phones, ensuring everyone hears race calls, sponsor plugs, and more during race nights. It's simple to set up, affordable, and free for fans to download and enjoy. Visit tracktune.live for all the details and join tracks nationwide on the app today.
Welcome back to the show. We've got Hugh Barter with us, and we're excited about what Hugh's got going on here. He's working on moving forward with FIA F3, and I have a couple of questions. First of all, you live in France now, and you moved to Spain for a while. Talk about just the logistics of bouncing back and forth between series. And then I also would like you to talk a little bit about the team that you've been racing for, because obviously they have put you in some great positions to have some great success in F4 and in F3 as well.
Yeah. So logistics are quite I think something that not a lot of people think about as an outsider. Like we do a lot of moving around. I've lived in 4 different places across the last 4 years.
Wow.
Just because I need to move around because each year I'm doing something different. I need it to be more efficient for me or make it easier moving around to the different events. So first year I lived in Le Mans, and the second year I lived in the south of France near Montpellier. Then we moved to Valencia in 2023 to race with Campos Racing, and then now I'm living back in France. And then in 2022 and 2023, like I said, I raced for Campos Racing, and because I was doing the French F4 while racing the Spanish F4, that's why we moved to the south of France, because it was easier to move between the two countries.
Gotcha.
And then when we fully committed to F3 and was just racing for them, we moved to Spain for that reason, and lived, I think it was like 30 minutes from the workshop, and I was going there almost every day to test something or to train or to correlate data. And it's actually a really cool experience to be that close to the team.
I can imagine. Okay, so now you're back in France, and you're kind of in between. You're trying to raise funding to get back on the track. So when you go back, will you have an opportunity again with Campos, or is there a different team? I mean, talk a little bit about how, your need to stop basically because you lost your funding. How does that impact the kind of restart period going forward?
Yeah. So this season, or at least in 2024, the FIF3 has already started. So we're more looking forward to doing FIF3 in 2025 as a full season. But there might be seats that open up during this season. To give you a bit of reference, each round in F3 is about 100 grand in euro.
Oh, wow.
So quite expensive, very expensive.
How many rounds are there?
10 rounds. So,
okay, so wow, that's $1 million,
yep,
right?
It's $1 million euro for a full season, around about that.
Wow.
And then for this year, while we kind of transition to going back to F3, we plan on doing GB3, which is British F3.
Okay.
And for that we need about 180 to 200,000, around that.
Total.
That'll be for the full season.
Wow, that's a slice of what FIF3 is. Why the big difference? Is it kind of regional versus national?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And I think FIF3 is super expensive because of the logistics of moving around internationally. So because they go to like Australia, they go to Bahrain. And then on top of that, I think honestly there's a little bit to do with like licensing. Obviously, you race on the same weekend as Formula One. It's a big difference between regional F3 and international F3.
What about as far as the challenge of actually racing in the two of them? Are they similar in terms of the level of competition, or is FIA just way up higher?
I think the competition is, I think the top 5 in GB3 will be close to FIF3, but in FIF3 you've got like 15, 20 of the same drivers. So I'd say yes, it's more competitive, but it doesn't really take away from the fact if you do win GB3, it's still a very good accomplishment.
Sure, without a doubt. Okay, so going back to FIA-F3, hopefully in 25 is the plan.
Correct.
And you said that's about €1 million. So what is the next step to F2? How does that happen? Do you just get to move up when you think you're ready? Do you get picked? How does that work? And what's the challenges, the obstacles, and the costs between FIA-F3 and F2?
Yeah, the jump is really, I'd say, more personal. Obviously, it depends who you're with, and the people around you might decide, or you might get an offer from an F2 team that say, okay, we want you to drive for us, and they might give you a good deal for it, and you have to take the opportunity.
Sure.
It can range anywhere from almost 1.8 to 2.5, from my understanding.
Okay.
So it's quite a big step from F3 again. But you race a lot more, and you race at more international circuits. So you go to Saudi Arabia, you go to Baku, you go to Abu Dhabi. So you're racing more in the, let's say, Asia area, or Western Asia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, once you get back, I mean, what do you think that you would need to do in order to be ready for the step from FIF3 to F2? What are you lacking, or what do you need to improve on, or what is it going to take, other than the funding difference? Obviously, what is it going to take for you to get that opportunity?
I just need to have a good season, honestly, in F3. I think I have that experience now from last year to really step up. I think last year I started really well. I qualified fifth, and no one was expecting it again. Making a jump from F4 to F3 directly to F3 was a bit frowned upon in the European scene, because
Why is that?
there's a intermediate level between the two,
Oh,
which is the regional stuff, and
okay.
to then go qualify P5 was a sort of like a how a slap in the face to a lot of people
Yeah.
who said don't do it, which was a good feeling. But I then felt like, I think, in my head I was thinking, okay, now I got to keep this up, and I think I just put too much pressure on myself in the middle of the season. Had some poor results. I think the pace was definitely there. I just wasn't
Okay.
putting it together. I would qualify mid pack, and then have the pace in the race. But F3 is almost just qualifying. You qualify, and then you can gain 2, 3 positions, maybe 5 if you're lucky during the race. Um, but yeah, it makes no difference if you finish outside the points. You make it. You might gain 8 positions, but at the end of the day, people are looking at where you finish.
Okay.
um,
Okay.
but then towards the end of the season, I started getting a lot more points, some good results, finishing in the top 10, a lot more. And then, yeah, like I said, the funding ran out, and then yeah, I think like in hindsight, I learned a lot, and I know how to come back, and it's always been a thing with me. Coming back for a second season, I've always done really strong, um, and yeah, so I expect when I do F3 again, to be fighting for the championship.
And you're still, I mean, you're 18, you're young, so you have time. And it doesn't seem to me there's this great age race over there like there is in NASCAR, where it seems like so many people think if you're not in, Cup by the time you're 21 or 23, it's too late, right? I think experience counts over there. So you're in a good place in your career. You just need somebody to get back behind you so
Correct.
that you can restart. And it seems like it's still a 2 to 3 year between F3 and F2, and getting the experience in F2 to be able to run a couple years there to maybe have a shot at F1. So you're in a good spot. It seems like all you're lacking right now is the funding that lets you get back to the track.
Yeah, and I think it's I would say there's the funding that gets me to the track, but there's also other expenses
Sure.
that come on board, that do benefit myself as a driver. That might be going to mental training. Can't fool everyone, but this stuff really helps. And even just like there are like track days that you can do for car control, and testing is a big thing prior to the season.
Sure.
People try to do as much of it as they can, because once the season starts, you're not allowed to do any testing. Um, but yeah, these are the sort of things that behind the scenes that people don't see, um, that I would say are quite a necessary part to getting some good results.
Okay, so you've proven yourself in terms of results. You've proven yourself to be very good and easy on equipment. You're very wise and a very calculating racer. I know you've raced against a number of drivers and probably beaten some of them who have kind of gotten ahead of you now. Talk a little bit about some of those drivers and maybe tell us a story or two if you can.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think so. I've raced against. Here's some examples. So I've raced against Jack Doohan. I've raced against
Yep.
Oscar Piastri. I've raced against. What's his name? I'm going blank. Because there's Oliver Behrman is I haven't raced against him.
Oh, okay. Ollie Bierman, yeah.
So I think you know him. So I haven't raced against him, but I think him and I have the same amount of wins in F4. So,
Oh, wow.
So there's him. There's Kimi Antonelli that you might know. I think.
Yeah, Kimmy's awesome. I love his content on Instagram. He does a great job.
Yeah, and I think I have more wins than him in F4.
Wow.
Yeah, and then there's other people you might know in F3 that I've raced against. Nicholas Solov, Christian Mansell.
Yep.
I've actually, you probably not know him, but I raced against Hadrian David before.
I do, yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I follow a lot of those. Yeah,
Right,
a lot of those
okay.
drivers
Okay,
on
okay.
Instagram. Yeah, because we want to know what's going on in the world
Yeah.
and who the prospects are. And it's interesting. You mentioned Ollie for one. I mean, Ollie's. You say that you have the same amount of wins as Ollie in F4. Ollie's on the verge. He's already run an F1 race. He's on the verge of a full-time seat in F1, and so that has to give you a lot of confidence that you can do the same, because again, comparing your pasts, you're right in there with a lot of these younger drivers that have gone up. And so you got to be excited about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely a big confidence boost, but it sometimes can be a bit frustrating when you see people like that and, just don't get the same opportunity, let's say, when you know that you could be competing up there.
Well, we are excited about where you're at, and we hope that if there's anybody out there, any companies that are looking for a great opportunity, reach out to Hugh, because he's definitely a rising star here. Quickly tell us about social media's website. Where can people find you to follow you?
Yeah, so you can find me anywhere, almost on every social media platform. So we usually do most of our business through like LinkedIn or emails. So my email is Hugh Barter Racing. You can also contact my dad at Chris at Hugh Barter Racing, and then my tags or my @ for everything is just Hugh Barter Racing. So on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the rest, it's all Hugh Barter Racing.
Well, we wish you the best, Hugh, and hopefully we'll be talking to you again soon when you're back in a seat here. That is Hugh Barter, and that is it for this week's Tom Baker Show. We want to thank all of you for listening. Of course, this show brought to you by TrackTune. TrackTune.live is their website. If you're looking for a way for your fans at your racetrack or your racing series to be able to hear the announcers over the sound of the cars, TrackTune is that way. Go to tracktune.live. It's a great app. Check them out. And also thanks to the folks at ultimateqm.com. If you want to go quarter midget racing, they have got a ton of wins behind them. ultimateqm.com. And of course, check us out on our social medias at The Wheel Nation, and our website, steeringwheelnation.com, and of course on our page on PowerTube TV. Thanks for watching, and we'll
Like this show? Want more? Then head to WatchPTTV.com, the new 100% free PowerTube TV streaming network. Home of the best classic and new motorsports racing and build shows on the web.